Hello, guys. Welcome back to Between the Ropes TV. It's Monday night, so we're live, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. Now, guys, get on there, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'm going to pass it over to Ray. Ray, give the people a rundown of what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, as Josh has said, we've got a lot to go through tonight on the live. We're going to start with Ryan Garcia potentially being lined up to face Jojo Diaz. We're also going to talk a bit about Haney and Kambosos too. We're going to also talk about Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. We know Amanda Serrano's got a fight lined up in August, but we're talking about potentially that big fight, the big rematch happening later this year or early next year. We're also going to be talking about the Joshua Kelly card that's coming up. We're going to touch upon Chris Billam-Smith against Isaac Chamberlain. We're also going to have a chat about that very, very briefly. We're also going to touch upon Ramirez, as in Zurdo Ramirez versus Bivol. And then catch your breath, because we'll be talking about Andrade versus Eubank Jr. potentially as well. That's been thrown into the mix. So there's a lot to get through. We're going to be relying on you guys as ever to be feeding into the comments, and any other fights or any other matchups you want us to discuss, feel free, jump in on the comments. That's what it's all about on here. We're here to talk about the matters in boxing at the minute, and any news that we have. So any news that you guys want to share with us, just put them in the comments, and we'll chop it up as we always do. So Josh, we'll get into this one in about Ryan Garcia and Jojo Diaz. I've been hearing from Jojo Diaz's camp that that's the fight that they want to make. Ryan Garcia is obviously talking about wanting to fight Tank. So you can forgive people for saying that this fight potentially can't happen. But I think this is a real good trade fight, because when you break it down, Ryan Garcia hasn't really faced someone like Jojo Diaz, has he?
No, he hasn't. So I'm torn here because, obviously it's well documented Ryan Garcia's had his time away from the ring looking after his mental health, and we've talked about that, and fair play to him. But I think it's now a curse how good he was against Fortuna a couple of weeks ago, because Jojo Diaz, obviously lost to Devin Haney, a couple of losses on the record. I think Ryan Garcia has now put himself in a position where it's super fight or nothing, because he's been so active across his social media that now it really wouldn't actually make any sense for him to do anything other than have a super fight, particularly now he's talking about 140. I know, we'll get on to Teofimo Lopez, no doubt, this week. But now Lopez is at 140. Obviously there's the existing 140 guys there. There's no reason for him to fight Jojo Diaz for me, other than it, making sense network-wise. It's not a fight that I really want to see, whereas Garcia Tank, I don't know about you, but that sort of whets the appetite for me.
It does. I think Garcia's Tank is that explosive fight that you want to see. He said he can come back down for that fight. The only issue I have is I can't see that fight being made for all the promotional issues. You're looking at the next best option. There's other great names at 140. I'll throw some from out here. You've got Regis Prograis there. Yeah. So this is who wants to stay at 140. You've got Jose Zapiras there. Mario Barrios there. If he can be at that way, I know he stepped up to fight Keith Thurman, but for me, he's a natural 140 pounder. Obviously, you've mentioned Teo's got a fight lined up, which we'll no doubt chat about. And then you've got people like Montana Love. He's known in the States. He's a good fighter in his own right. He'll be looking for a big fight. So there are some of the names, and I quite like Isaac Cruz as well, because what I want to see is somebody that can really put the pressure on Ryan Garcia in the ring and take him into uncomfortable places. So if that Tank fight can't get made, do you see all of those names I've just mentioned there perhaps being an attractive plan B, Josh?
It's on paper, and for us fans, yes, definitely. I think to be honest, I think they're all attractive options sort of in their own right. For me, Isaac Cruz is the standout name there. I know he's fought Fortuna at 140, but Fortuna's not a 140-pound fighter. So, that weight certainly suited Garcia more than it suited the opponent. So Isaac Cruz at 140, to fight a genuine 140-pound fighter, I quite like that fight. And as you say, the pressures that Cruz would bring, I think, would be good. We've not really seen Garcia under the cosh yet, have we?
No, we haven't.
I'd quite like to see that. And I'm going to keep the same energy, as we say. I thought Garcia possibly needed one more fight before going into a super fight. I just wasn't anticipating quite how good the performance against Fortuna would be. So Isaac Cruz would make sense there. But with the back and forth between Floyd Mayweather in particular and obviously Ryan Garcia on social media, and now he said it any weight, anytime, any place, that's the fight that's got to be made. And if Garcia is going to stick to his word, I mean, he's talked publicly about filming negotiations, so as people know, he's not the one that's doing the ducking. And, obviously we smile at that. I'd love to see it myself. Obviously, we know it'll never happen for a million reasons.
I think legally you wouldn't get away with that, but never mind.
But we'd love to see it. But I don't think you can pump out that kind of energy again without actually backing it up and being like, do you know what? Okay, I'm going to have to take this fight now. So I think it's going to have to, it's not tank or bust, that's harsh. But I definitely think he's got to fight Gervonta Davis next now after all the talk the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it looks as though he's going to have to be backed into that corner. And as I've said, my worry is the promotional red tape will stop that fight from being made. Other than that, the cynic in me sees that Ryan Garcia may lowball Tank Davis. What I mean by that is he may give him a deliberate low offer. So Gervonta Davis has got no option but to reject that offer. Then he'll walk away saying, well, I made him an offer and he didn't accept it, without going into the details about the finances behind that offer. That's potential. I mean, if this fight comes off, it is probably arguably the most explosive fight, I think, in my opinion, between 135 and 140. Do you agree with that, Josh, or not?
No, I agree. I think, someone's getting knocked out is the general,
It ain't going to C12, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Someone's going to get stopped. And I think that's what makes it exciting. And the low ball offer is interesting because, we know that happened. We hear about it. But I don't think he can afford to, because if Ryan Garcia, now he's right back in the public eye after dipping out for the last 12 months or so. He's now right at the forefront of everybody's mind. So if we get an announcement that his opponent is somebody that we're having to check who they are on BoxRec or far past their best, DAZN at the minute, it's well documented the potential issues with Matchroom and the shows aren't quite taking off, particularly stateside. So they've really got to back what they're doing with Golden Boy. And, obviously Golden Boy, I know they've got Zurdo Ramirez, possibly with the Bivol fight. We'll come on to that later on. But if DAZN want to push the American market, which they've got no choice but to do, let's be honest, if you want to be a global platform, you need to seize America.
Yeah.
They can't justify them pumping us someone that we're having to search on BoxRec as an opponent for Garcia after all the talk. So while I hear you and it happens, I just don't think they can. I think if DAZN were to let Golden Boy say, right, actually, we're going to be fighting Askari Metz or, 1,000,001 other BoxRec people we're having to check, they're basically saying we failed. And that, I know that's quite a strong statement, but I think that's where it's got to. They've got to have a big second half of 2022.
Or it could be they're not as confident as Ryan Garcia is what they perceive to be, because that's a big thing for me. If they're confident with Ryan Garcia, they're putting him in a mega fight next. It's as simple as that for me. In the States, you don't have the safety net or the ladder, as you could say, in the UK and Europe, where you've got the English title, the British title, the European, the Commonwealth. Our fighters generally are stepped up that way. In America, it's slightly different, isn't it? I know you have the NA belts, the North American belts, and the remit of who qualifies for that is slightly different as well. I just think if someone like Ryan Garcia, whose platform with the social media backing, they are pretty much left with no choice to secure him that type of fight. It may not necessarily be Tank for the issues that we're kind of alluding to, but if it's not Tank, it has to be of that caliber. And if it's not the kind of names that I've mentioned, or yeah, hey, I'm not the matchmaker here, but I'm a fan like anybody else watching this. If it's not those kind of names, and it's immediately going to put the fans off. And I'm just wondering how that's going to hamper Ryan Garcia and Golden Boy going forward, because he may not recover from that with all that big following. You know, you've got the hardcore boxing fans looking up to him, watching his every move. I think he's just going to leave himself wide open to criticism if that big fight isn't secured. So I guess it's really it's squeaky bum time, isn't it, for Ryan Garcia and his promotional team?
No, it is, yeah. I mean, just you saying that, and you're quite right, but does that then bring the potential mental health argument back into play as well? Because, you know, as employers, they've got to look out for him, haven't they, and do what's right for him. And he's such a media figure now across, you know, the internet and YouTube.
Well, they'll never take him off social media. They'll never take him off social media because that's a big selling point for him. I guess in terms of how to protect them is, you know, they've got you can. There's many ways you can protect a fighter in terms of their career. In matchmaking is one of them. But it comes to a point where they can no longer protect him in matchmaking if they believe he's got ability. So at some point, they're going to have to put their money where their mouth is and back their horse. And what I mean by that is they're going to have to match him against somebody with equal ability or better. They can't continue to do what they kind of did with Julio Cesar Chavez, and pretty much what they're doing with Gilberto Ramirez, who we'll touch upon with Bivol. They just can't do that. They didn't, you know, people have done it with Andrade, and you just can't do that now. He's at a certain level now, Ryan Garcia, and he needs to be tested. And otherwise, it's going to crumble around him. I'm talking about the pressure from boxing fans, pressure from social media, and like what you were alluding to, all that talk about Tank is just going to be like wasted oxygen, really. So yeah, but we'll move on, shall we? We'll touch upon Haney and Kambosos too. I don't know if I want to see this one again. There's lots of talk about that's definitely going to be happening. I saw a tweet that was circulating, funny enough, on Instagram from Michael from Coppinger and Michael Benson. They both tweeted the reply from Devin Haney saying he was basically saying it's news to me. Do you see Devin Haney just moving on? Does this fight need to happen again? Such was the comprehensive victory for Haney.
The fight doesn't need to happen again for me. No, I think this is the issue with rematch clauses. And from a champion's point of view, I fully understand why they insist on a rematch clause being in there. However, I think it's really got to depend on the fight, because that fight, as you say, and no one could really argue it, it was comprehensive for Devin Haney. The scorecards, they weren't that close anyway, but they were still closer with it being in Australia for Kambosos. It just doesn't need to happen. It's a rematch, you know, nobody wants to see. And, you know, in promoting this video, we'll talk about rematches in general. And I just think that they've got to start and be smarter. You know, we're seeing far too many rematches now. I mean, you know, let's be honest. The Wilder Fury trilogy, yes, it gave us 3 dramatic boxing nights. However, Fury was robbed the first fight. The second fight stopped him comprehensively. And the third fight robbed us of an undisputed fight.
But they were far more competitive than what Haney.
Oh, far more competitive.
Yeah.
But for me, if the result's comprehensive, we just don't need to see a rematch, you know. And that's with Haney and Kambosos. We don't need to see that rematch. For me, you know, they're talking about Lomachenko being back in October and having a fight. I'd much rather have seen Lomachenko versus Haney. You know, Haney, look at the size of him. His natural dimensions tell you, and it's quite well documented, that he's not going to be at 135 forever. So for me, let's fight Lomachenko before he moves on. You know, and for Devin Haney's own career, it's quite well documented again that he took a pay cut to go to Top Rank and to get the Kambosos fight. He's done all that. He's now got to take a rematch that nobody really cares about, nobody wants to see. So it's not going to build him momentum, and it's cost him a potential Lomachenko fight. which you imagine if Haney fought Lomachenko in October, beat him, the man's what? He's got to be in the top 5 then of anyone's pound for pound list. You know, Lomachenko, let's have it right here. He's long been considered one of the best boxers on the planet. And it's just robbing him of that. Whereas instead, he's getting older. The chances of him staying at 135 are slimmer, and we're just going to see a boring rematch. I might be sounding harsh on this, and Ray, correct me if you disagree with what I'm saying, but it just does nothing for me, to be honest.
Yeah, it doesn't for me ever. I think, and I was tipping Kambosos to win that fight. I ended up with egg on my face the way Haney dominated Kambosos with that jab. It was really, really basic the way he dealt with that pressure. I thought it was the educated pressure from Kambosos that were causing problems, and he just completely put it to bed. The size played a big difference as well. And I think you're right. I think a fight with Lomachenko would have being excited would have made more sense. I'm not too sure whether because of Lomachenko's got a lot of stuff going on, he would have been actually ready for that fight. But it would have been a better fight than what Kambosos would have given him, such how poor he was in the fight they already had. I don't think there's much interest even in Australia in this fight. So for me, I think it's back to the drawing board for Kambosos, who is a good fighter.
Yeah.
He did look small. I always said he is a small lightweight, and that really, really showed in that fight against Haney. Look, when he's on song, he causes anyone problems in that division, but it just barely wasn't his night. And I think Haney's got to go onwards and upwards. Maybe an interesting fight will be Haney versus Tank. I'm sure Tank will be up for that fight because Haney's the one with the belts in that division, regardless of what Tank's already had in the past. Haney's now the legitimate don in that division. Tank, if he wants to be seen as that, he's got to go and see Haney. So at least that one is more likely to be made than I think than Ryan Garcia because for all the marbles. But any fight rather than Haney Kambosos too. I mean, guys in the comments, let us know what you think about that fight. Would you want to see that fight later on this year? It's quite clear what the two of us think about it. I just don't think it sells. I just don't think it's interesting. And I think Josh, you've made a really good point, mate. Haney would be better off moving up and vacating because his body's not going to hang around to make 135. We saw what that did to Teo being drained at the weight, didn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And from his own sort of marketability, if you like, while he's undefeated, he carries more value, doesn't he? So I wouldn't want to see him stick around at the weight too long and like Teofimo Lopez lose that O, and then you've gone from having all the marbles and the world at your feet to you've got a bit of a rebuild on your hands. He doesn't need that, does he? And to be honest, I'd quite like to see him link back up with DAZN, purely because they've pumped a lot of money into him to build him, particularly in the UK. He was quite active when he signed. He's done a lot of press and media over here. So it'd be quite nice to see that link up. It'd be great if you could take all the belts back to DAZN as well. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, let me just ask you, Ray, does the Katie Taylor, while we're talking rematches, Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, now for me, that's a rematch I want to see.
Yeah.
That's definitely something I could see happening in the future. I know Serrano's got a fight in August. She's fighting Brenda Karabahan for the IBF and WBC featherweight belts. I think Serrano's naturally a featherweight. I think she's naturally a featherweight. Don't get me wrong, she caused Taylor problems. When they fought that round 5, she gave her hell. But I think one of the advantages Taylor had was she was naturally bigger, physically stronger, and she was able to impose her will. That came on apparently later on in the fight. If she has a rematch, I think Serrano's got a better chance because Katie Taylor, I picked Serrano for the first fight because Katie Taylor for me is declining, and that fight would have that's another difficult fight for Katie Taylor, and that's going to take it out of her. And I think out of the two, we're going to see the improvements in Serrano. So yes, that's a fight I want to see happen. We want to see that at lightweight again. But the difference between that fight and the other rematches, that fight had everything. It had action. It had effective aggression. It had ring craft. It was equal in parts. Some parts you could see Taylor was getting the better of and getting the momentum. Other parts you could see the Serrano that was far more balanced. What a great effort it was for women's boxing. So I'm in favour of seeing that fight again. Hopefully, it's over in Ireland.
Yeah, I think the Irish thing's definitely something that I think we'd all want to see. There was talk of stadiums. Obviously, it's not happened. We know what card Amanda Serrano is fighting on there in the next couple of weeks, which is disappointing. But I agree with you. I think, and at some point as well, I think it's worth probably saying, isn't it, that Katie Taylor is getting older. She's 36 now. She's going to run into trouble at some point, isn't she, in terms of who she's facing? So It's definitely a fight that I think we need to see. I mean, we'll move it on. Right, should we talk Northeast card, Wasserman Boxing, Josh Kelly?
Yeah, this card's going to be on. It's going to be on Channel 5, I believe. It's a stacked card in terms of not just Northeast talent, but there's some talent from your way as well. So topping that bill, you've got Josh Kelly. He's in against Lucas Basila, who's the current South American middleweight champion. This fight is going to be at light middleweight, super welterweight. It's another chance for Josh Kelly to really stamp his authority at super welterweight and really get himself into a ranking. So this is going to be an intriguing fight. This kid's got a decent record, and those South Americans, we all say that, we all come up with that cliche that they're tough, but the surprise packages we've seen. I keep going back to Lara. Everyone looked at Lara and kind of laughed at his record and thought Josh Warrington will walk all over him. We all saw what happened. Jeremias Ponce, when he fought Lewis Ritson, we all saw what happened. So these guys are no gimmies. You've also got Harlem Eubank. Now, originally Harlem Eubank was penciled in to fight Tom Farrell. I know you spoke about Tom Farrell from being a potential opponent for Anna Mazim. This is at 140, and Harlem Eubank's really interesting now, isn't he? He's been around a bit. He's been around. He's had his feel out fights. He's had his introductory fights to the sport, and he's ready for titles. That would have been a great fight, but Tom Farrell was pulled out with COVID, so he's fighting a Mexican called Elliot Chavez. He's 11-4. I don't know much about him. Don't think anybody does. But again, as I just mentioned, you can't kind of dismiss his record because these Mexicans come to fight. You got Pat McCormack going in his second pro fight. He looks a class act. Potentially, I'm being a bit biased because he's from my neck of the woods, but he's a great talent. So he's worth keeping an eye on nice and early because he's going to blossom into something special. From your neck of the woods, you've got Jose Stewart, the heavyweight. You've also got Raza Hamza, the featherweight. He's going in for an IBO featherweight belt. You've also got, in terms of female boxing, Jordan Barker Porter from Newcastle. She's up against the ever graceful journeywoman, as we call her, Beck Connolly, who's going to give her a tough fight. Jordan Parker is on the comeback trail, so it's going to be interesting to see how she responds. She had a win in her last fight. So I think she's 4-1. And then you've got Ivan Drago himself, Stephen Robinson, the big heavyweight from the Northeast. I kind of want to see how him and Jose Stewart kind of progress, because I see a big fight in the future between those two. If Stephen, he's had a defeat, he won his last fight, but he needs to keep winning for me, and he needs to start looking good. So yeah, it's a pretty decent card. I think it's going to do well over in Newcastle. I'm really excited to see how Josh Kelly kind of picks himself up. There's some massive fights for him at light middleweight. We've had Troy Williamson on the show, and
that's been ordered.
surely, Josh, what do you think?
No, well, I think that's what I'm hoping this is a bit of a precursor for. I mean, it's great for you in the Northeast. Great for like, to be getting good fight nights back, because there's been a little break, hasn't there, in fairness, with COVID and just different fighters having time out or swapping stables and whatnot. So it's really good to actually see you getting some big nights up there. And I mean,
we used to have Sky come up when we had when Ritson was there. Ritson left and he went boxer but didn't fight, and he now got to Probellum, and we've had Probellum come up a couple of times. Prior to that, we had Frank Warren come the odd time. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of like, it's nice to see it changes, and it not always Liverpool, Manchester, London, Sheffield. It's nice to see boxing spread up and going to Wales or going to Scotland or going to the Northwest, Midlands, and come up to the Northeast. So yeah, it's exciting times for us. So we've got a comment from Imran. Imran's a very good friend of the show, and it's nice to hear from Imran. Guys, if you don't know Imran, check out his channel as well, Imran Mia TV. He shot us a comment with Demetrius Andrade. He's also putting in a comment saying, Ray's favourite fighter, Boo Boo. Imran, you know me well, mate. You know me well. I'm not too sure if love's the right phrase I would use for Boo Boo or hate, but I'm just not a big fan of his. But just while we go on to that, Josh, we may as well, since we're on about a Eubank, talk about Andrade and Eubank before we come back to the Josh Kelly card. There's a lot of talk about this fight potentially being happening, just as to talk about Eubank and Conor Ben. Andrade, I mean, if you look at his resume, it's poor.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to sum it up in one word, the fight with Eubank's an interesting fight. Both of these guys are at a crossroads in their career. If this fight does happen, Josh, how do you see it going?
It's very tough, isn't it? Because while Eubank's not always won, I'd say Eubank's probably been in with the better opposition myself. Andrade, for a two-weight world champion, he's missing those names on the resume, isn't he? I know he came close to fighting Billy Joe Saunders, which would have been, I think, a good test for him in a good fight, but it didn't happen. And then he had various fights on DAZN that, I'm thinking Selecki and various others that he was overpaid for, clearly. And I just don't think he impressed that much. I like him, and I can definitely see a skill set, and we saw that particularly in his fight with Liam Williams. But again, I just think he could have done more. For me, he's joined this little club of American fighters where he's almost spending all his time calling out the likes of a Canelo, or now it's Chris Eubank Jr., as opposed to actually getting a decent fight. But let's not forget, Andrade had the Zach Parker fight, pulled out through a shoulder injury. Then a month on from the scheduled fight date, now it's, I'm ready now, I'll come to London, I'll fight Chris Eubank. And, he was getting over $1 million to face Zach Parker. And I know that was on a BT show, so he's the away fighter. And I think we said at the time he maybe feels harshly treated by the fact that the WBO allowed Usyk to move up and become the mandatory straight away for the main belt, yet he was forced to face Parker for an interim title. So I understand the arguments for it, but I just think it's bizarre. I mean, Imran's put here, he backs Andrade to beat him. And I do agree, Eubank's style is quite easy, Imran. But at the same time, I also think Eubank is relentless and he's got a chin on him. So I think Andrade is not going to be stopping him. And if he fights like he did in the first few rounds, against like a Liam Smith, or Liam Williams even, sorry. But when Eubank puts the pressure on, I think he could cause Andrade some problems. So I don't know. I'm going to back the Brit, and I think I'd be backing Chris Eubank to get the win. Before I hand it over to you, Ray, Imran, if you're with us, anyone else with us, do hit that like button. It does help us get noticed and get more of us going to get the comments going. A bit of a quiet one tonight so far. So, Ray, how do you see that fight? So it'll be the tiebreaker. I'm backing Eubank. Imran's
I think what you have to remember is Andrade isn't busy enough in fights. Andrade seems to fight in bursts. Don't get me wrong, when he does put it together,
he does look class. He does look a different gravy, but it's put together against who? You know, Chris Eubank, as limited as he is, he's still a hell of a lot better than, in my opinion, Andre's best win, which was to go back to 2013 against Vanes Matosorian. That was his last, in my opinion, big win where I thought, wow, you know, who is this Andre? Since then, he's fought Liam Williams, Brian Rose, Jason Quigley. You know, these type of fighters that come forward and they're very, very slow. Eubank's quicker than those fighters. He takes a shot better than those fighters, but he throws a lot more punches than those fighters. And it's not always a guarantee, if you look at styles when they're broken down, that a boxer beats an infighter, because they usually can't cope with the aggression of the infighter and they don't have the power to keep the infighter off. I don't think Andre has the power, particularly at 60, to keep a big, strong 60, as in Eubank, off him. I really don't. And it's all right saying in burst, he has looked really good. He has looked tremendous when he's put his punches together. Go back to that Jason Quigley fight. When he put those combinations together, he looked good, but he likes to take a breather. I don't know whether that's the weight making issues. He does like to take a breather in fights. You can't do that against Eubank, particularly Eubank of old, who was just one-way traffic. This new version of Eubank that's probably trying to jab a bit more. But the relentless Eubank, I think, would cause Andre a lot of problems. I'm probably going to go for Eubank in that fight. If both guys do the weight properly and Eubank goes back to his old relentless self, but it's a bit more smart with his aggression, I think he's going to cause Andre a lot of problems. I don't think Andre can keep him off.
No, I'd agree also. I mean, Imran, I'd like your thoughts on this, mate. But, you know, all this talk about Andrade, how's he do 160? It's a struggle and all the rest of it. I'm moving to super middleweight, and now he's calling out, as you say, a big 160 in Chris Eubank Jr. It just doesn't make sense. To me, it stinks of just, I want a payday, to be totally honest. I mean, it does make you wonder what his purse is worth for DAZN. If he's knocking back just over $1 million to fight Parker for an interim.
I mean,
and then he takes, go on, Ray.
This Janabek from Kazakhstan, that's a very good fight for either of them. This Janabek's so underrated. I've seen him before, and he's quality. He really is a quality operator. These are the type of fights that Andre needs to be in. Look, he's not getting any younger. He's not getting he's getting some adulation from some fans in the States, but generally he's not getting that adulation because it's a case of, well, who's he fought? He's built up a record. He's probably, him and Billy Joe Saunders have arguably got the worst resumes of two-weight world champions that I can think of at the top of my head.
I'd agree.
Yeah, and Billy Joe's is probably better than
Andrade.
Yeah, his resume is better than Andrade. And at times, if they had fought, I would have favoured Andre. But between him and Eubank now, Andre and Eubank, I can't see how. I can see how Andre wins by outboxing him, but I can't see him maintaining that that work rate and that volume. I just can't see him doing it.
No, I'd agree, mate. I really would. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what Imran thinks of the way. And Imran, feel free to join us as well, mate, if you're still watching. I can send you the link. Just let us know if you want to hop on. I mean, I suppose that sort of brings us on to the next thing, isn't it? I don't know if you've seen today, Ray, but Conor Benn has put all over social media that camp has started.
Yeah, that he's ready. He's ready. I've seen him hitting the bag, and he's looking fresh. I mean, bag work for most post boxers. If I'm going to be cynical again, shouldn't be any difficult. But he's back in camp, and who knows what's lined up for him if the Eubank fight doesn't come off. I'm sure there'll be something in the pipeline. I've got to apply the same energy with Ben as what we have done with Ryan Garcia. For me, he's ready for a name now. He's at that stage where why not put him in with somebody that's going to challenge him? somebody like David Aronesian, I'm desperate to see that fight. I really am desperate to see that fight. I really want to see him in with. If Michael Mickinson is going in with Virgil Ortiz, and Conor Benn's supposed to be rated higher than Michael Mickinson, even though in my opinion, Mickinson's got the better boxing skills. That's boxing skills. Why aren't we not seeing Ben in an equivalent fight? I think we've had long enough with Conor Benn. We've had long enough with we're building them up and building them up. Again, we're seeing it with Ryan Garcia, so we can't not see it with Conor Benn.
Sorry, Ray, I'm just sending him around the link.
Yeah, no worries. I think as well when you look at Conor Benn, the other criticism I have is how many punches has he been in with? So that also tells you something as well. When you're looking at fighters and you're looking at rating their potential, look at the different styles that they've been in with. You know, if they're orthodox fighters, how many southpaws have they been in with? How many, if they're outboxers, how many in fighters have they been in with? How many counter punches have they been in with? How many defensive fighters have they been in with? You've got to look at the different styles that people have been in with, and that'll give you an overview of where they're going. And that's one of the things about Ryan Garcia that I said. Ryan Garcia, he's not really been in with that many strong, come forward fighters. That's one of the things that I would like to see him up against, and that's why I mentioned Isaac Cruz's name. So Conor Benn, for me, there's still a big question mark about him, and hopefully his next fight answers that. Hey man, nice of you to join us, mate.
How's it going? You guys all right?
Yeah, happy birthday for the other day.
Say that again, sorry.
Happy birthday for the other day.
Cheers, man. Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Feel old now, 30.
Mate, I'm not telling you my age, mate. But I mean, you brought up Andrade, and we were going to touch upon Andrade and Eubank. So yeah, cheers for bringing that up, mate. But you think Andrade's got a beating of Eubank?
I just think stylistically, when you look at it, that Andrade, I mean, Eubank's got really poor feet, and that's the issue I have with him. Like, I think I agree, the relentless pressure, but it's a bit reckless pressure. It's not very, it's not an educated pressure, it's uneducated. So I think someone like Andrade, who's a technically sound fighter, basically, I say this: if the only way I see Eubank beating Andrade is Andrade shot to bits, which there is a possibility because he's been so inactive, he's had injuries, but I don't see the best version of Andrade losing to Eubank. Like I think it could be a boring fight as well, where Eubank might be chasing shadows. Like when we think about Eubank fighting Groves and Billy Joe, he got beat effectively quite comfortably. I know the Billy Joe fight, Billy kind of gassed towards the second half of that fight, but first half of the fight, he was kind of chasing shadows. And Groves fight.
That's the thing, man. That's what I see Andre doing. Similar to Billy Joe, I see Andre gassing because for me, Andre's a little bit like Canelo, not in terms of ability, but in terms of fighting in bursts and perhaps, wanting to take a breather. Do you see that much in Andre? Because Eubank's going to be relentless. He's going to be putting that pressure on him a lot. He's not going to give him time to breathe. He's going to be sitting on his chest.
You know what? The only problem, the thing is, I think he could do that, but Eubank's been fighting a bit funny of late under Roy Jones. He's been fighting. He fights in bursts as well. I don't understand. This is what I mean. Eubank's a funny fighter. I don't really understand his psychologically what goes through his head. He fights funny. Like if he goes and the only way he can beat Andrade, he's got to put it on him. He's got to stick it on him. He can't beat him in a boxing match. He can't stand at range and look to outbox him because Andrade will box his ears off. He's got better feet. He's got faster hands. But the way Eubank's been fighting of late, it'd make it an easy night's work for Andrade. But if he sticks it on him, who knows? Who knows? I just don't know about Eubank. I'm not convinced. I was high on him initially at the start of his career, but I kind of fell off a little bit. The guy's calling out Jake Paul, and saying the winner fights. He's fighting Conor Benn. It's just, I've been put off. I'm a bit put off with Andrade as well. You know what I mean? Like, it's just these guys, man. These guys are a bit of a prima donnas. They're avoiding the stiff competition. They should be fighting each other. Andrade should be fighting Janibek. They should all be fighting each other, but it's becoming a bit circusy at the minute. It's getting irritating for me, as a boxing fan. I'm getting irritated.
Why not Mal Charlo?
Yeah.
It's he's a good name at 160. I mean, in my opinion, I've got my own views on Golovkin, but I still think, and I think Josh would probably agree, Golovkin's still a name in that division that they can't afford to sleep on. Do you agree with that, Imran, or do you think?
I think Golovkin smokes them all. To be honest with you,
yeah.
To be brutally honest, I think Golovkin beats them all, even at 40, 41, wherever he is. Like I said, I don't think Golovkin will be easy for Canelo, let alone Andrade, Charlo, and all those guys. I think Golovkin's the real deal. I've always thought Golovkin beats them all. I said I think he becomes undisputed. And even if he loses to Canelo, I'd love to see Golovkin fight all of them because I still think he becomes undisputed. I
agree with you.
Guys, you know what? I'm driving while I'm talking to you guys because my battery's going to die. So I'm just driving while I'm talking with you guys,
that's no problem, man. We'll keep the conversation going and you just kind of fire away with your racial sharp comments. But definitely I agree with you about Golovkin. I think although it's going to be a different challenge stepping up to 168, in his comfort zone at 160, boys, I think, and guys in the chat as well, I think Golovkin, that's pretty much his home. I can't see anyone coming into his home and taking those belts, which I believe have his name on it. But talking about fights where there's going to be potential unifications, etc., that moves us nicely to talk about Gilberto Ramirez, also known as Zurdo, against Bivol. We all know how Bivol's people's opinions of Bivol have skyrocketed after that great win against Canelo. But there's Ramirez, a padded record or a good record, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Padded.
Could he be the guy to usurp Bivol, Josh?
No, I can't see it. I like Ramirez and I like what he does. It's quite entertaining, high knockout ratio on his record. But as we say, over 40 pro fights, all by winning. You look down the resume, padded is the only word, isn't it? I'd love to see anybody, try and justify his resume.
He had a good win against Sullivan Barrera.
Yeah, that we're talking. There's a couple of decent wins, but 40 pro fights, you should be, if you're at that level, multiple world title fights should be in there.
You should have 6 or 7 names later after that.
Exactly. It's just what we've talked about, and obviously I know you felt strongly about it with Jaime Munguia, isn't it? It's just Golden Boy building that record, delaying the trigger on cashing in, and now fortunately the WBA, or unfortunately if you're a Brit in terms of Callum Smith or Joshua Buatsi, the WBA are trying to make them pull that trigger and get him in. I mean, I think Bivol wins it comfortably. I think, his boxing ability is too good. He's just a classy operator, isn't he? And again, we've talked about it with Frank Warren, and I sat and slagged off the preparation that he's given Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce for potential world title fights. And I'd argue exactly the same here for Golden Boy. If you think for Zurdo now to jump in with Dmitry Bivol after his recent fights, it's a fish out of water, isn't it? He's just not going to be able to make that jump for me. So while it'd be a decent fight for DAZN, a decent fight for... it wouldn't be a bad fight to watch, no doubt about that. But it doesn't get me excited. I'd much rather see Bivol in with a Buatsi or a Callum Smith, which obviously both have been talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to, once you have finished, to bring Imran into it. But for me, a better fight for Ramirez would have been the same in with David Benavidez. And we'll have to ask people what their thoughts are in that fight. I think they're very similar. They're both massive. They both come forward. Ramirez boxes a little bit better than Benavidez, but they would meet in the center of the ring, and with both having that Mexican heritage, I think that would be a fairly decent fight in Mexico or in one of the southern parts of the United States. Bivol's a completely different kettle of fish, and this is what I've been drumming up because I've got my other predictions wrong with Taylor Serrano and Haney Kambosos, but as you know, I've got the test to prove it. I backed Canelo to get beat off Bivol.
You did.
And I said what would do it was Bivol's feet. Bivol's far quicker than what Canelo is, and all he has to do is be in and out. And the reason why I was so confident, because when you look closely at Canelo's loss to Kovalev, in my opinion, was beating him just using a jab. And Canelo took a while to figure him out. He stopped him, but I wonder whether or not that was partly to do with how exhausted Kovalev was after the Anthony Yarde camp, and Kovalev wasn't the Kovalev that stopped Nathan Cleverly all those years ago. Let's get that right. So Bivol for me takes apart somebody like Ramirez. Ramirez's style is tailor-made for the counter-punching prowess of Bivol. It's a that fight. You're right. There's other fights in this country that are more mouth-watering and more competitive. Callum Smith. That's a great fight for Bivol. Buatsi still gets hit a lot. But yeah, do you not think they're better fights for Bivol at this stage?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think again, Bivol or Buatsi. Buatsi or Callum Smith. I mean, just a quick one. Who would you rather see get the fight out of the two? Callum Smith or Joshua Buatsi?
For me, Callum Smith, on the basis that Callum Smith at least is a former world champion. Buatsi's still a work in progress for me. Callum Smith isn't. Callum Smith just needs to be active. And active at a new weight. He's with Buddy McGirt. Yeah, he's with Buddy McGirt, and you'll learn a shed loads from Buddy McGirt already. We just need to see him. For me, the reason why he lost the Canelo fight in the way he did was the weight loss. A strong Callum Smith puts in a much better performance. We may not necessarily win, but he puts in he makes Canelo work. And I think he gives Bivol, I still believe, will come out on top, but he gives Bivol problems because the power he gets from that left hook on the leverage on the inside, and just as a short left hook, I wouldn't be surprised if he puts Bivol down.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think it's tough because we've only seen him in 2 rounds. But in those 2 rounds that we have seen of Callum Smith at 175,
he looks a different animal.
He looked like a different beast altogether. In fact, I'd like to see the Canelo fight, the Canelo rematch, I should say, I suppose.
At light heavy.
At light heavy, I think it would be a different ball game completely. I think the weight killed the first fight, and I think from about the end of the 4th round, you could see that Callum Smith, he just stuck at 168 too long, didn't he? I think that's the unfortunate thing. But I'd love to see that fight. And as much as I'd like to see Callum Smith get that world title shot, and I think it'd be a great fight with Bivol, I'd also like to see Joshua Buatsi fight somebody. I mean, Borderlick, who obviously Callum Smith's been mandated to face as a final eliminator. That would actually swap them for me. That would be a great fight for Joshua Buatsi. He's well ranked in the governing bodies, decent record, experience, been in with some decent names. That would be a better fight for Joshua Buatsi because I think, again, Craig Richards is a great fight and we saw him push Bivol, but I think Buatsi would benefit a lot from just having one more before he makes that jump. There's still some questions there. I think work in progress is possibly harsh, but I wouldn't disagree with it if it makes sense. Like, he's a great fighter and a great talent, but we just need to see that acid testing a little bit more from him. I don't think Craig Richards quite tested him how Matchroom and us fans hoped he would. If I don't know, maybe that's harsh. But
yeah, I mean, you go. Craig Richards is a good fighter. I think it's one of those where people didn't know a lot about Craig Richards, so they expected him to be flattened by Bivol. But you also got to remember as well, Buatsi had a tough fight before that. He had the Croatian kid, who was giving him some problems. So Boatti, for me, I call him a work in progress because when you've got a defensive-minded coach, I'm going to use football terms here, you've got the equivalent of an Antonio Conte in your corner. You've got like a also Mourinho type figure. You've got a defensive-minded coach who's really good. We all know the work that Virgil Hunter's done. But I'm not seeing those improvements in his defence. And he's spending a lot of time stateside. He's not doing it in Americana, no, he's just going there for the camps. So I'm wondering what's going on. This will probably be his third fight, his next fight on the Virgil Hunter.
Yeah.
I want to see a bit more improvement.
Yeah, the concerning bit as well, in between rounds in the corners, I wouldn't say Virgil Hunter's getting frustrated, but you can see the instructions are quite basic as well at times, that, it is reminding him of his fundamentals. Now, could that be a potential issue with Josh Boatti in terms of nervous energy, forgetting the game plan, thinking he's better than it? Who knows? We've seen that in the past, let's be honest. But it definitely raises questions. And again, the Virgil Hunter factor, I think, is another reason to give him another, it's 12-week camp, but obviously, as you say, he's spending a lot of time stateside.
Yeah.
That partnership can only benefit more from what would effectively give him another 2 camps going into a world title fight. So now I'd definitely rather see him do something like that and Callum Smith get the Bivol fight. That's if Bivol Beterbiev couldn't be made, because, Bivol's not currently got a fight for the second half of the year. Beterbiev obviously recently fought Joe Smith. I know there's the talk of Anthony Yard in October, but we've been over that shit show.
Yeah, so, and we won't waste anybody's time going over that again. But although we're realistic on this, we would love to see Beterbiev and Bivol, but we know that that's just going to be a really difficult fight to make. And at some point, Canelo's want to exercise some sort of clause to fight Bivol again, which again might put that back. And these guys aren't getting any younger, but particularly Beterbiev. But he's not an old-looking 37-year-old, Beterbiev. He's got a lot left in that tank. But it just goes to show you that there's some serious players at light heavyweight. So stepping up to light heavyweight is no easy task, as Canelo's found out. He may not even want to go back there and fight Bivol. Part of me thinks he would do. He wants to revenge. He didn't get a chance to against Mayweather. He probably realised the Mayweather one was a bit too early for him. I don't think he wants to get left as losing to Bivol. I think he wants to eventually clean up at light heavyweight, but that's it's easier said than done, isn't it, Josh?
No, it is. But again, I think I talked about it on our promoters video that we did over the weekend, and I think Canelo is a special fighter. Let's not forget that just off one loss. And I'll be honest, I still back him to make the adjustments. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm also the same guy sat here backing Anthony Joshua to beat Usyk, which I do sort of seem to be in the minority on that. But I'm keeping the same energy. I still think Canelo can make the adjustments, come back and beat Bivol. I really do.
Do you think he copes better with the fact that the big adjustment he's going to make is to quicken his feet? Can you really see him making that adjustment?
Yeah, I can. I think we'll see more of that, because if you think quicker feet's going to benefit him in his next fight against Gennady Golovkin, isn't it? Because, Golovkin's 40 years old, 41 years old, I think, just. So while I still pick Golovkin to beat anybody at middleweight, those 41-year-old legs, we saw it with Klitschko back against AJ, didn't he? He started on his toes, but as soon as you get to the middle rounds, the legs start to tire. It's just Father Time, he's undefeated. So I do think if Canelo fights Golovkin this time with quicker feet, he'll do a job on Golovkin, and I'm backing Canelo to win that. And then I think it's almost a good precursor of implementing a different footwork tactic and quicker feet, going then into a Bivol rematch, which presumably would happen in May next year. So I think he can. If you think he's got, apparently he went straight back into camp post Bivol. He had a couple of weeks off and went straight back in. So if you think he could be talking like he's had nearly a year working on it by the time he gets back in with Bivol, I back him to do it. There was also talk of shoulder and wrist problems in the camp going into Bivol. and I wouldn't have said he was gun shy against Bivol, but I think Bivol fought the perfect fight to negate him. But if he has a cleaner camp, I mean, don't forget Canelo's 32 now, so he's had a lot of pro fights. So there's some, there's mileage on the clock, isn't there? In fairness with Canelo, whilst he's been comfortable.
Yeah. He's a high mileage luxury car, Canelo. Let's not forget that. But just quickly, I don't even think he needs quicker feet to beat Golovkin. On his second, he fought Golovkin in the inside for most of that fight. And in my opinion, he beat him. Those were close fights. It could have gone either way. Some people had Golovkin winning the first fight. But either way, we're going to have to see a better performance from Canelo because the first fight against Bivol wasn't good enough. So the second fight, if he does get a second fight against Bivol, he's gonna have to make some adjustments, isn't he? But we'll leave it there for tonight, guys. Thank you very much for your comments in the chat. Much appreciated. Big shout to Imran Mir for jumping on and giving us his thoughts. Guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And stay tuned, guys, because we've got a lot coming up this week. There's loads to talk about, loads of fights coming up at the weekend. So stay with us.
Cheers, guys.